All right, first thing we're going to do today is I'm going to go over this article again and try to show you the stuff that was incorrect, all right, in there. I know I gave it to you, but I'd like to go over it anyway. Am I right in assuming, if you look up on the screen here, that everyone has installed Android Studio, correct? Yes, okay, well, that's a good start. And everyone understands how to create a new project. Is that correct? All right. Again, it's just start a new Android project. When you do go in there, you can have blank spaces in here if you want to. And as we found out yesterday, if you give it the path and it doesn't have a folder by that name, it'll create one for you. You can put in your company domain. You can put that in regular because when it creates the package, it'll reverse it for you anyway. And you understand that if you want to start fresh, so to speak, you go with a blank activity. All right? Any questions on any of that stuff? All right. Then what I gave you yesterday, but as I said, there were some mistakes in it, was this edit the welcome message in the main activity. All right. So when you brought it up, there was that hello world in there. And again, as we talked about, again, this is just meant to be review. All right. If you look up on the screen right now, all right, this is the activity main. And as you can see, I still have it in there, quote, incorrectly, unquote. You should not be putting your stuff in there like that. You should be opening up that strings.xml file and putting it in there for what is referred to as localization reasons. Now, it's interesting because it's not flagging it. It used to be, when I worked on this last summer, if you did not do that, it would get a warning flag. And it would say, for localization reasons, you should put this in a strings.xml file. It's not saying that anymore. All right? But you should all understand now, too, how we can go back to our design mode and actually physically go in there and change this. All right? We can click on this. We can find it. And mine has been changed. All right? So I don't know exactly what's happening here, but it was changed. All right, as far as I can tell, unless it somehow got removed from my strings.xml file, which is always possible. Shouldn't have to do that. All right, so there it is. Hello world, welcome to my app. That's how I am going to expect that you're going to put strings in for anything that you do. Like I said, whether it's a label, if you want to start a text field with putting some text in it, on a button, basically on anything that you're working with. All right? Okay. And again, all the steps to do that were shown right here. Okay? All right. Then we were supposed to add a button. Now, one thing I did not show you yesterday that I'd like to show you about that now, that is this. If I go back over to my activity main and I go into my text mode, which is my mode that shows me basically behind the scenes what's happening. Do you notice I get a bunch of squigglies under button? Can everybody see that? All right, if I put my mouse on it, it tells me the view is not constrained. It only has design time positions. It will jump to position 00, which is the upper left-hand corner, unless you set these. And it says if you want more information, you can click the More button. Or I think Control F1 would work also. All right, well. The point is, what we're going to be getting to very soon, I don't want to do it right now, is we're going to be setting constraints. We're going to be working with layout managers, and we're going to be working with certain constraints. All right? But short story long, I guess, is right now, since I have not changed any constraints, this button that is physically right here will jump to right here when the program runs. All right, and that's okay. I'm not worried about that. That's something that we'll deal with at another time. All right, so they go through and they have you do this, and they tell you exactly what to do here. All right. Then they tell you to create a second activity. Does anyone have any problems understanding how to create a second activity? Again, all that was coming back here and going up to App and right mouse clicking on it, choose New, and then go down to Activity. All right, and you can choose any of the activities that are there. For this example, it was to be an empty one. Okay, when you do that, you've got to give it a name. You got to give it a name for the activity and a name for the XML file. Okay? So, the reason I'm telling you that is if I go over to my second activity, all that's on it was this. Okay? And it just says, welcome to the second page. Now, if I go back to my text, I'm going to get the same message about constraints. Okay? I didn't use the exact same names that they had. I used most of them, but I checked later, and I guess I didn't use every exact same name. So, all the steps to do that then were on page 15 of this. Okay, here is where it started to break down, because there was some stuff in here, and I don't know exactly what the date was on this document. It is, notice, it's almost exactly 3 years old. All right, that's the problem. Because as stuff changes, ways that you used to do things that used to work may or may not work anymore. So I did probably at least, what you did or what you would have done if you were given this problem, so to speak. And that is, okay, I came in there and I put in their code. I started getting error messages. So I started to Google the error messages. All right, which is always, I think, at least the best way to solve this. So I typed in Java error, and I followed it with whatever the error message was. All right, I want to show you some of the stuff I found out when I did that. Again, this was nothing that would be beyond any of you doing the same exact thing. So, I had Googled here, cannot find symbol class Onclicklistener. All right, how did I get that? Well, again, if we go back and we look at the code, you'll notice Onclicklistener. All right, and there were some things in here that, you know, like I said, I put them in, stuff turned red, etc. I didn't understand it, it didn't understand it, so I went there and literally just put that in, and the system said, well, when you go in there, you want to do this stuff. It's not the button Onclicklistener. They said you want to do a view .view Onclicklistener. So it said try changing the button .Onclicklistener to just an Onclicklistener and add that import. I did, and it worked. All right, but I was still having problems, and I don't know if you have been or not, but it was bugging the heck out of me that when we had something that where it needed an import, and in the past we were able to do a Alt-Enter, right? And it doesn't seem to work here. So I Googled that. And I knew it was called, basically it was called like an auto fix or something like that. So there was a guy who made this thing, and you can all do this if you want to. This is supposed to work. All right, I haven't had any errors since then. But you can go do this. Did you find something else?
Yes. The block of code that's in the document is correct. It doesn't tell you exactly where to put it until you read on the next page.
Yes, that's true. That part of the problem with that is when you put that code in, you've got to put most of it inside of the onCreate method. Yes. And if you don't do that, you're right, it won't work. Yeah. I've not seen something like this that shows you all these pictures and then explains how to do it. Mm-hmm. Because most people, when they see it, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, then they go back or they don't even read it. Yeah. But you're right.
but after I put all that in on create, it wasn't giving me errors
Okay.
for the set on Onclicklistener.
Okay, well, it did for me, and I put it in the right place. But this is what they recommend. And you can all try this if you want. You don't have to. But if you go in and under Android Studio, if you click on File, and you go to Settings, and you go to Editor, and you go to General, and you go to Auto Import Java, they say that you should change this insert imports on paste. It's set to ask by default, which means it should ask you rather than just automatically including the imports. If you change it to all, it should automatically do it for you. So again, you don't have to do that, and I'm not even saying it's going to work, but this is the claim, and there are people who answered it afterwards and said, yeah, you're right. Okay, I did that and it worked. All right. And then underneath that, so this is the thing right here that says ask by default. You click there and change it to all. And then under the mark, the add unambiguous thing, make sure that that's checked. Where it says add unambiguous imports on the fly. I'm not going to guarantee that that's going to fix any and all problems that you're going to have, but hopefully it will make it that when situations arise, it'll make it easier for them to be fixed. All right? Everybody get that? Okay. And again, that's just to show you, I did a bunch of this stuff last summer, and a lot of the stuff that I did has changed since then. All right? And stuff that I was used to doing X way X just didn't work. This is what I believe at least Evan was talking about. So they show you the code, and that's on page 16 of 21 here. But on page 17, then they show you the steps. All right? Now, as far as testing the application, when we set this thing up, it should have included 1 or 2 emulators for you by default. They actually should be in there. All right? I'm not saying they're the best emulators. We'll talk about emulators in a bit. All right? But they say in here to run it, literally you can click that button right there and it'll ask you, you'll run app. And then it should show you what emulators you have. Choose one. Doesn't matter which one if you've got 2 of them. But again, all of the steps are then shown on this page. All right? And it says when the emulator opens, it says this could take a while. Usually, when that happens, it's just the first time you start it up. Now, I will tell you this because this is not in the book. There is absolutely nothing wrong with leaving the emulator on, even if you go back to your program and make changes and then run it again. The advantage of doing that is if you're using the emulator, it doesn't have to restart. It should go faster. That's what I found. All right, when I've taught this in the past, in fact, I have had students who literally have left the emulator on as long as their machine is on, period. Even when they're not in Android Studio anymore. That way, when they came back into it, it was up and running. Okay? Yes?
For mine, it says missing system image for them. Should I download that?
You can. I don't even know what that is. Right. So again, if you set the constraints in like this is what should happen. My button is up in the upper left-hand corner, but that's just how mine looks. All right, hello world, welcome to my app. You click the next page, and it pops you to the next page that says, welcome to the second page. All right, didn't really do very much, but I just wanted you to see that. All right, so you have the correct code now. All right, and we're not going to do it now, but I want to make sure I give you some time, at least an hour in each class, even as we start, because that's when you're going to learn is just by trying stuff. All right, so at least that's my hope. All right, so I'm going to jump up to, that's not the one I want.
That's this one, and then it's going to take a while.
This one is for the on V7A or the accelerated time basic.
The first one.
I'd like to take a little bit of time and go over both of these documents. That said, I don't want to go back and rehash a lot of stuff we've already talked about yesterday, and some of it which we've talked about already today. All right? The good news, this site, if you've never heard of it before, again, I gave you all these links, but it's raywenderlich.com. The bad thing about this site, so to speak, the bad thing about it is mainly an iOS site. In other words, it's mainly a site for Apple. All right, but they do have support for Android as well. And if you look in here, it says this beginning Android development is now up to date with the latest version. It's been updated twice since 2015. All right, so they try to keep it up to date. I don't know what the date is on this. I don't know if that 16/13/18 means anything or not. I have no idea. All right, but again, I'm not going to go over installing Android Studio. I'm sure not going to go over installing Java, etc. Or getting Android Studio, setting up Android Studio, installing Android Studio, etc. Verify the settings. So this is all stuff that we've looked at already. All right. The reason I want to take a minute to go over this document is what this document does is it'll explain a lot of the stuff that's in there that I gave you kind of a general explanation of yesterday. But a lot of this has got a more detailed explanation. All right. Now, somebody had mentioned this yesterday. Says, even though you just downloaded Android Studio, it's possible it's not the latest version. And it says you should get used to, when you bring it up, going over and clicking on that configure and seeing if there's anything in there, all right, that says check for updates. So when you click on configure, be right there, check for updates. That way you should always have the latest and the greatest. All right? That's the good news. The bad news is, as Ethan just mentioned here to Colin, some of this stuff, when you download it, it takes a while. It has really nothing to do with connection. It just takes a while. All right? Okay. And as it says, if an update is available, it'll say click the update and restart button, and it should restart Android Studio for you automatically when it gets done. All right? And again, if for some reason you're in the middle of working on a project and you're like, Jeff told me I should click that configure button, I'm going to do it right now. For gosh sakes, please make sure if you do that, save your project first. I'd hate to see, hear somebody say to me, well, I did what you said, even though it was already running, and now I lost everything I've been working on. Well, that's not to be too cruel, but that ain't my problem. All right? You should all be smart enough that before you do anything like that, that you go in and save first. All right. Now, they're talking here about installing a new SDK. And an SDK, as it mentions, is a software developer kit. All right. And as it says, it enables you to create apps. Yes, yes, yes. But it also allows you to create AVDs. An AVD is a version of the emulator. All right. It stands for Android Virtual Device. And the reason that's important is if Brady knows that he's going to be using this on his Android phone, and he doesn't have his phone with him, but he'd like to really see how it would look on that phone, not on a tablet. All right, if it's a fairly new phone, he can probably find it in the list of AVDs. Okay, then he can bring it up, and it's supposed to be pretty much the same size, the same look and feel as he's actually going to have on his phone then. All right, this is the other big thing when you go into this. And if you look right here, what they're talking about doing is, I got to remember where it is. Okay, file. Build. Huh? But again, this just looks totally different In fact, if you watch some of the tapes, if you ever do, that I did last summer, they're not going to even look the same now, as different as this stuff is. But when you come in here and you open up, you go, on the bottom, and I guess I can do it from there. You go to the SDK manager. So if you go down here, all right, when the system starts up, all right, you're able to go into the SDK manager. And if you do that, this is what I wanted to show you about that. It looks pretty much like this. And what you'll notice in here is there'll be a lot of stuff that will say not installed. All right. That said, that doesn't mean, because I've had students do this in the past, oh, geez, I better install all that stuff. Boom, 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 boom. No. Especially if you're going to say, for example, let's say that Lollipop here is the minimum that you are going to support. Why would you want to install anything that's lower than that on here? That wouldn't make any sense. All right. But you can always look on here. So notice we've got Lollipop. All right, we've got the latest version of Marshmallow. We've got the latest version of Nougat. That's all that we put in there. And they're not installed right now. So if you click on there and you click Apply and OK, it'll install them for you. All right. The best way for you to learn this is to sit and play with it. All right. The stuff that's in here, most of the stuff that's in here, you're not going to have to worry about. Anything that's in there that says Android TV or that says Android Wear, etc., you won't have to touch that stuff unless you're planning on developing something for a TV, all right, or for a wearable device. I would just say keep away from that stuff. They explain the tools in here, where the update sites are, etc. So you may want to take a look at that. Then they have another, all right, and notice what it says here. It says Android Studio has a nice little step-by-step tool to help you create your project. Start with the Create New Project or Start a New Project, all right. Identify the project. We've done all this stuff already. There's nothing new here, all right. I don't know if that's supposed to be, oh my God, Android or something else. I don't care, all right. Some of this is what we looked at yesterday. So in other words, here they're telling you how many people are using this product, etc. All right. You go through here as it says, okay, you set up your minimum devices. Typically, again, in here you will choose phone and tablet, and you will choose whatever they give you as a default should be fine. I would never check anything in here. All right. So you do that. They have you do a basic activity as opposed to an empty activity. What's the difference? The basic activity has this little thing down here. Other than that, there isn't much difference. In fact, in the second one that they have you do in here, that we're going to do as a class in just a bit, they ask you to use a basic activity, and then they have you remove that later. All right? It's called a floating button. All right? So you come in, you set up your activity, you set up your layout, all that stuff. None of that's new. What is a little new here is if you take a look, it'll explain to you on here in much more depth and breadth of coverage than I did what this stuff means. All right? So let's say, they've got things in here, for example, that's just the name of your layout. But let's say that you want to learn about different layouts that are actually available to you in Android. You go out to developer.android.com. All right, you search and you put in here Layout Manager. All right, and there's some of the stuff in here on Layout Managers. Okay, or just layout, I don't know. But the point is, that's always a great place to start, is developer.android.com to take a look at what's out there. Building the project, if you haven't built the project yet, you should. Now, I do want to mention something about that. If you take a look in here, notice there's build and there's run. Everybody see this? what is going to happen to you probably eventually is you're going to get some goofy error, and it's going to be on code that you didn't touch. It's on system code. If that happens and you're like, I'm trying to run this, I'm getting this stupid error, I didn't do a frickin' thing, then go over to build and tell it basically to clean the project. That's supposed to clean it up. Then you can go back if you want to and rebuild it. Then run it. Now, that may never happen to you. When I taught this a couple years ago at Blackhawk, I had certain students, they had to do it all the time. And I had other students that never had to do it. All right? And they would even say, why is it that I have to? I don't know. They sat next to each other. They pretty much looked to me like they were doing the same thing. They were both intelligent people. Was it their machine? I don't know. All right? Now, the thing about Gradle is what basically works in the background. You don't have to worry about it. But when you do click the button to run, that's what's going to happen. For lack of better words, look at it, that Gradle has got to take your XML file and all of your XML files and your Java files, etc., and make them communicate with one another. All right? And again, if you want more, I know you had asked me about this, or something about it yesterday, but there's the res directory, as I mentioned, that's got your images, your layouts, your styles, your colors, etc. All right? And they've got this manifest, they talk about the manifest file. You'll notice that some of that stuff that you were supposed, on your project, you don't have this in there. All this stuff used to be built for you automatically. When I taught this last time, I was surprised when I went out here, and I should have. I apologize for not going out here earlier, but when I looked over here and I looked at what was here, all right, I was very surprised. This used to be, when you clicked res, there were about 15 folders in there. All sorts of stuff. And what it means is, if you look, for example, under layout, there's hardly anything there. So if you want to set up layout and you want to set up images and stuff, you've got to go and add your own folders to do that. All right? And the reason I'm telling you that is the book that you have the PDF of, the screenshots and stuff are going to look different because that's a few years old. All right? So they show you how to run the emulator. They show you how you can create a new emulator. All right? When you go in there and you click Create New Device, again, you get a list that looks like this. So if I know, for example, I've got a Samsung Galaxy 5. I would look through there. Well, there's a Galaxy Nexus. I would probably look for something that looks similar. Maybe a Nexus 6. I don't know. All right? As far as selecting the Android version, much of the time you won't have to do anything there. It'll already be preset based on what you set up earlier. Okay. When you're all done, they tell you should verify the virtual device. And that just means go back and check your settings. Make sure it looks okay to you. All right. I mean, I've added these before where I have chosen absolutely nothing but the defaults, and they've worked just fine. Yes?
Does it show how to close
the question was, does it show how to close the emulator? Well, if you look here, so if I bring the program up that I had before, and I go and run this, there, notice I can create a new virtual device from there also. Here's the two that I have. I'll try that one. Try the Nexus 1. And I'm going to click OK. Okay, there it is. The other one is a tablet. This is the phone. Again, you'll see how long it takes. I will tell you that when we did this, when I was at Blackhawk, sometimes for some students, it took up to 10 minutes. That's why I said it's not a bad idea to leave this up and running. All right. So there's mine. There you can see hello world, welcome to my app, next page, welcome to the second page, because those constraints haven't been set. Now, to answer your question, I don't think there's a, like, you can't right mouse click on it. I always just come down to here and I tell it to close the window. All right, that's what I do. Is there a better way? There could be. It's just that's the way that I use. Okay. They have some advice in here about selecting devices, etc. All right. The emulator itself, if you take a look up on the screen, the emulator itself has a toolbar, so there's certain things in here that you can set. All right. The thing to remember about the emulator is it can do a lot of stuff for you, but it can't do everything. To my knowledge, and I may be wrong, it may say something different on here, but I don't think I am. For instance, it's an emulator. It's a piece of software. So if the idea is what you want to do is have your particular program go out and make phone calls, I don't think it's going to be able to do it. All right? So certain things it'll emulate, but it won't be able to do some stuff. All right. Running on the device, and it says here if you have an Android device that you want it to run it, so this is what you do. Much of this is what Ethan was already good enough to do for us. He said about tapping that like 7 times. Here they say tap it a multiple number of times. All right? Yeah. Yeah, until something comes up. There also is a new feature in here. It says from version 2.0 of Android Studio that's called Instant Run. The idea with Instant Run, if you've got it turned on, is it's not that you're going to have to even keep, it tries to automatically update your app when you make changes and save them. All right. It won't do it for everything that you try to do. And there's 3 kinds of things in here. There's a hot swap, a warm swap, and a cold swap. I haven't done anything with it. All right. But you can read that if you have an interest. And they show a test for it. I didn't run through that. All right. This is literally the one they have you create in here. It's just hello world. They don't do anything, but they just have you run through it. I would suggest, though, if you had problems with the other one, and if you're like, I just don't even know where to start with this stuff, then I would go back and like use this document and just step through it, a page at a time. Again, you'll have some time to work on it today as well. Now, they also talk about importing, just so you know. I think I mentioned this even yesterday or the other day, that much of the stuff with importing is you get people who have built projects and then have built them in Eclipse. And now they want to import them over or import them into Android Studio. That's what they're talking about. All right? You also should be able to, for example, you should be able to import in that folder that I gave you yesterday into this. All right? If you want to practice doing that. Now notice it says download this project. So if you want the project, you can even do this, and it'll save it for you as a zip file. There's really not anything in it. It's probably not worth doing, but it's there. And they run through the steps, again, for doing that as well. I think this is the project, I should say. This is it, I think. They put a card view in there. Okay? Whatever. Now, one thing about this, and this is what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to click this to go to the next part of the series. But just so you know, I guess they don't show it in this one. They'll show it in the next one. There are quite a few Android tutorials out here on raywenderlich.com. There's other sites. And if any of you find a site and you're like, yeah, I see that one you told us to go to, it's not really that great. I found this one and it's a lot better. Then use that one. All right? All right, in part 2 of this, and I was going to have us do this. Okay, I was going to have us go through this whole project as a class. The only problem with doing that is when I emailed you that stuff yesterday, one of the things I emailed you was the folder that has all the assets for this. And you've got to go in and create a bunch of subfolders, and you've got to put your images in the right folder, etc. All right. The problem with doing that is if you screw up, then you're like, mine's not working. Nothing's working. And then I'm sitting there and walking back and forth and we're getting nothing done. All right. What I'm going to ask that you do for the first thing that you turn in is I want you to try to do this. Now, I'm going to hold you that you're not going to just, you can download the project. And I'm going to take for granted that you're not going to just download the project and turn it in. That you're going to try to do it yourself. Because if all you're doing is downloading the project and turning it in, what the hell did you accomplish? All right, you showed that you could grab a zip file, unzip it, and zip it back up again, or whatever, and give it to me. That's not really much of anything. But I'm going to give you some time today to work on it. But I just want to step through this with you. All right, so notice what they say. Setting up the Android manifest file. What they have you do in there is they have you go into that file, and we'll look at it in a minute, and they set the orientation to portrait, meaning it will not show landscape. All right? If you look up on the screen here, and if I go to design, all right, and I don't remember which one of these it is. If you look here, notice it says Nexus 4. All right, I can change stuff up here, but one of the things that's up here, and maybe you know, maybe you don't, but one of the ones that's up here, I can go back and forth between portrait and landscape, and it'll show me what it'll look like. There's so many different features and functions that are in here. But again, it looks a lot different than when I used it last. The good news is if you take your mouse and put it on at least some of them, well, you used to, I was going to say you got tooltips. All right? But again, it's not going to help for me to sit there and say, now let's do this. Now let's click this one. Now let's click this one. It's going to make a lot more sense if you're clicking it yourself. The problem with doing a thing like that as a class is no matter how fast I go, some of you it's like, man, could you just pick it up? And there's other people who are like, could you stop going so fast? All right. That's why I think it'll make more sense for you to do it yourselves. All right. The Getting Started with Android Studio, they have you create another new project. This one, again, if you want to, this is the one I'd like you to try to create. All right. It is, but I'm going to ask you to make a couple changes to it. That's how we'll make sure that you're doing something. All right. The first thing I want you to do, and I'll send you this file if you want it, is the Magic 8-Ball actually has 20 possible answers, and I know that because I went out to Wikipedia, Magic 8-Ball possible answers. All right. And I put them in here. The one that they have you do only has 6. So I'd like you to change it so that in the array that they use in here, and you'll see it in just a second. So in this array that is, let me go down, I'll show it to you. Oh, where is it? Just the answer. Boom. There, see this? This is about 2/3 of the way down. So you're going to change this because they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10. See this? I don't want you to use that fortune list. I want you to replace those values that are in there with what is in here, and I'll email it to you in just a minute. That's all. All right. The other thing I want you to do, I can write this out if you need me to, but the other thing I want you to do is notice what it says here. There's a label there. Everybody see this? There's a label that says, suggest the question with which you can answer yes or no. Then click on the magic ball. Everybody see that? I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that's put in there as a label. You put it in there as an edit text. Have the user put in their question here, click the button here, and have a result come out here. Does that make sense? If you really want to see if you can do something, see if you can make the result come out in here. All right, it'll be a little bit more work. All right, I was going to have us do the same 8-ball we did last year, but then, like I said, we'd have to go in and I'd have to make copies of all those little pictures I have because you have to do them at different pixel densities, and I didn't feel like doing that right now. All right? So I'm going to give you some time in a bit to go over that. But like I said, the whole thing, when you get done, it'll look like this. But again, if you look on the screen, yours right here, you can have a label that says ask a question and then have an edit text. You'll click the button that says what's my fortune. If you don't like that, have it say whatever. Click it and have one of those 20 sayings come out over here. Does everybody understand what I'm asking you to do? Does anybody not understand what I'm asking you to do? All right, you're going to do this project, all right, but you are going to replace what they showed back up there, as far as the answers, you're going to replace them with this that I'll send you in a minute. All right, the other thing that I want you to do is I want this to be an edit text in here. You can say like question or whatever. And if you don't like the what's my fortune, call it whatever you want. I want you to, for everything that you do in here, I want it set up so that it runs. Okay, we'll start looking at constraints today, but I want all of your text, this what's my fortune, etc., the text here, to all be in the strings.xml file. I don't want you to hard code in anything. All right? With that said, I'm going to go back into the book, and I'm going to jump into chapter 3 with you. We're going to look at that. All right? And again, I'll send you this in just a minute after we take a... In fact, it's 1:22. It's a little early. Why don't we take our break now, and I'll send this to you right now. Yes?
Can you also tell me what's the name of your emulator so I can make mine exactly like yours?
Yeah. I have 2 of them.
Yours seems to come up like infinite.
I should close that and try it again. There.
I can't read that.
I've got a Nexus 10 API 25 and a Nexus 1 API 25.
And which is the one
The Nexus 10 is a tablet. The Nexus 1 is a phone. All right. It's 1:23. Let's come back. We'll take about 15 minutes. All right. We'll make it 1:40. And then when we get back, we're going to go over chapter 3 right here, how to develop your first Android app. Okay?